Don't think of them as advanced level concepts. These are, the concepts which are, very, very, basic sort of things which you need to understand. And you might have, might expect a few questions around these concepts during your interview. And these are, important for you to understand while you start working on things, practically. So first of those things is an Apex transaction. All right. What is an Apex transaction? An Apex transaction represents a set of operations, right? So an Apex transaction is a set of operations that are executed as a single unit. Okay, so a transaction in Apex means a set of actions which are completely executed or are not executed as a whole, right? So they are these are the set of operations which are executed as a single unit. And if there is a problem in executing the entire stuff, this entire transaction gets rolled back, right? So either it will get completed or it will get rolled back to the initial stage. Okay, so this is set of operation which cannot get executed half. Got it? So that's what an Apex transaction is. Got it? So sometimes, while you're writing the code, it becomes very important for you to either complete a certain operation or just take it back to the initial stage, and you don't want to complete it half and leave it like that. Got that? So that is where this Apex transaction concept is very important. So you'll have to understand that, okay, fine, this is this is where I've written the code, and this will either be completely executed or it will be rolled back. All right. So that's what an Apex transaction is. I'll talk little more on this. All DML operations in a transaction either complete successfully, or if an error occurs in one operation, the entire transaction is rolled back and no data is committed to the database. So what happens in a transaction? All the DML operations. I hope everyone understands what a DML operation is. Data manipulation language, insert, update. So if in a transaction, if there are, let's say, 4 DML operations which have to happen, either all of them will get completed or all of them will be rolled back. Got it? Think about it. For an example, um, let's say you have written a code, and your code actually enters an account into the system, then creates a contact under the account, and then creates an opportunity under the account. Let's say this is your code. Okay, so your code has 3 DML operations: enter an account, enter a contact, enter an opportunity. Right now, the code enters the account. After entering the account, while it tries to enter the contact, it finds error. Okay, I've written a code which should do 3 things: create a contact, create an account, create a contact, create an opportunity in the sequence. Think about this. If an account gets created, and while it's trying to create the contact, at that time there is some error, some validation error or something for the contact. Okay, now ideally what should be the right thing? If it keeps the account in the database and just does not create the contact and opportunity, then what will happen? Next time when you try to redo that by making those changes on the contact, it is again going to create one more account, making the data redundant, right? That's the problem. So that is the reason why this statement should ideally ideally either complete fully or should get rolled back. I created the account. If the contact was not created, the account should also be rolled back. Correct? So that's the concept on that transaction thing. The boundary of a transaction. So I think we understand what a transaction is, right? And what we'll have to understand is all the DML operations in a transaction either complete successfully or they are completely rolled back. The boundary of a transaction can be a trigger, a class, method. So the boundary of a transaction is a trigger that you are running. The trigger can be the boundary of a transaction. A method from a class can be the boundary of a transaction. Okay, an anonymous block of code, just a piece of code that you have written, just for one-time execution, that can also be the boundary of the transaction. A visual force page. So while a visual force page gets loaded, okay, and some method need to run there, that can also be the boundary of transaction. So a visual force page will not, um, load half. Either it will load full or it will throw an error, right? So that's the thing. Got it. So these can be the boundaries of the Apex transaction. Right. So all the code. So for your understanding, now you can put it this way: that all the code that's written within a trigger, either that will completely get executed, or all the DML operations inside a trigger, either they will get completed or they will be rolled back. So there is no such scenario where uh, it, half of it gets inserted and half of it does not get inserted, and still that half part stays in the database. Okay, it will be rolled back. All operations that occur inside a transaction boundary represent a single unit of operation. So that's something that we just talked. Okay, so all the operations that occur inside the transaction boundary represent a single unit of operation. It will, happen as a single unit of operation. Now, why are transactions so useful? Why does it work that way, or why this transaction is important, and why all the more important for us to understand transactions? Okay. Transactions are useful when several operations are related. So when step one is dependent on step two, and step one should also not get executed if the step two is not getting executed. That's where the transactions are so important. When operations are related, right? We will have exceptions, and I'll talk about that also. There can be certain situations where you do not uh, have the steps related, or the transactions related, or the operations related to each other. So that's again, one thing which we are going to talk about. But in general, where your set of operations are related to each other, that's where the transactions become so important. I was just giving you this example, right? Account contact. If the account gets created, contact does not get created. So ideally, the account should also be rolled back. Otherwise, what will be the problem? The next time someone is trying to insert that contact, my code actually has the code for inserting account, so it will again go and create one more account for the same contact, which is not required, right? So these kind of operations. So transactions are useful when several operations are related, and either all or none of the operations should be committed. Okay, so either all of them should be committed or none of them should be committed. So that's where the transactions are useful. This keeps the database in consistent state. So that's what I was actually telling you, that if account gets created, contact does not get created. Next time you make changes in the contact data, try to upload it once again, it creates one more account. So right, so your database becomes inconsistent. Your duplicates will increase for accounts, right? So understanding transaction will help you, write the right kind of code, and keeping in mind the transaction thing, how a transaction works, and then you can write the right kind of code. Just to give you an example, I came across a client, just for your understanding, I came across a client who were having close to 85,000 records in the contacts object, and they were pretty sure that they never had 85,000 contacts. And when we did a cleansing, we were finally left with some 3,000 odd contacts. So some of that, program was not, running correctly, and that was creating duplicate contacts. Every time some trigger was running, it was creating some duplicate contact. Right. So this is how your database can become inconsistent if you do not understand these logics. Okay, and write program without understanding this part. All right. Okay. So transactions keep the database in consistent state. There are many business scenarios that benefit from transaction processing. There's one more scenario which we are going to talk now. Um, so just try and understand this. This is something which is relevant to your something that you have seen practically. Transferring funds from one bank account to the other bank account. Okay, try and understand this practically. If you're transferring the funds from one account, let's say I'm transferring money from my account to your account. Okay. And firstly the money gets debited. So ideally what happens there? The money gets debited from my account and it gets credited to your account, right? So it will go and check, first of all, it will check my account, see if the money is there or not, whatever transaction I'm going to do. It will check if the money is there or not. It will pick the money from there. Now, the moment it tries to put it in your account, it finds that the account number that you have given is wrong. Maybe any small reason. So when it finds that it's not able to put the money in your account, then what should be the ideal thing? It should roll back the previous DML also, right? Because it has made changes in the first account. So from my account, the money has got deducted. Your account, it never got added. So ideally, it should go back and roll back the first thing also. If that is not rolled back, then the entire system will become inconsistent, and it will be very difficult for us to manage things, right? So that's one more example that we are talking here. Transferring funds from one bank account, it involves debiting the first account and crediting the second account. These two operations need to be committed together to the database. So either both of them should happen or none of them. So this is where your transaction concept helps. Got it? Please tell me if you have any questions or doubts here. So usually a trigger, a method in the class, um, and a visual force page load. When you say a page reference and the visual force page loads, these methods are transactions. Okay, these are transactions. So all the DML statements written inside one trigger will execute completely, or they will not get executed at all. That's how it is, right? So a trigger is a transaction, the boundary of the transaction, right? So that's what we need to understand. Now the second thing that I'm going to talk about is, so that's one concept, the transaction thing. Do we have any questions or doubts from there? I hope everyone is okay on that. All right. Now, the second concept that we're going to talk here is apex and order of execution. Okay. What is this order of execution? Um, order of execution is, there are so many things, we have right from the beginning, we have understood that there are so many logics which can be put in our uh, Salesforce org, right? So you can have, and for the same object, you can have multiple logics working in. You have validation rules, you have triggers, before triggers, you have after triggers, right? You have some system validations. So there are so many of them. There are so many logics which are written. All right. Now, when we are dealing with so many logics, there has to be a certain order of execution, right? So when a record is being entered, there has to be some order that what happens first and then what happens. So whether the validation rule comes before the trigger, or whether the trigger comes before the validation rule, things like that, right? That's another thing which we need to understand to be able to understand how Salesforce actually works in the backend when you're trying to enter a record, which one will be evaluated first and all that. Okay, so here it is, the apex and order of execution. When you save a record with an insert or update statement, so when a particular DML statement happens, either through user interface or page layout, when I click on the save button, or from the backend upload, wherever, when an insert or update statement is happening, there's a certain order of execution which follows. So that order of execution includes all the logics that you have put for that particular record, or for that particular object, in fact, right? So let's say I'm talking about opportunity. On opportunity, I have a validation rule, I have a workflow rule, I have a trigger on opportunity, right? So what will be the order of execution of these things? That's what we are going to talk here. Okay, this will help you understand how your code actually works. Okay, so see, the process is Salesforce performs the following events in this order. First thing is, on the server, first of all, loads the new record field values from the request and overwrites the old values. Alright. So first of all, the Salesforce will load the new field values. It will take the field values. So it just takes the field values. If the request came from a standard UI edit page, Salesforce runs system validation to check the record for compliance with layout specific rules. So we understand page layout, right? So if the insert or update, whatever is happening, that is happening from the page layout, then Salesforce will go and check the page layout specific rules. Okay, but if it is happening from the back end, let's say data loader kind of a thing, then those rules are not checked. Correct. So any field which has been made required specifically on the page layout, that will be checked in this case, not the otherwise, not otherwise, right? If it's coming from the data loader and all that stuff, then it's not checked. Okay, so that's one thing. So this is what is checked: required values at the layout level and field definition level. So these kind of things are checked if it is being done from the UI. Okay, see, if the request came from standard UI edit page, so if it came from the UI, then only these things will be checked. Right. So what all is checked here? Required values at the layout level and field definition level, valid field formats, maximum field length. Okay. So this is what is checked here. Okay. Salesforce doesn't perform system validation in the step when the request comes from other sources such as an Apex application or SOAP API or data loader and all this stuff. So this check will not happen if it is actually coming from some other source. Got it? Let's say a data loader from backend if the data is getting inserted. All right. Now, so that's one thing. Then the next thing which happens is all the before triggers are executed. So first it will check whether the request has come from the page layout or it has come from the backend. If it is from the page layout, it will go and check page layout specific rules. Then the next thing is the before triggers. So we have written before trigger, before insert, before update. Those triggers will be executed. Then runs the system validations and runs any user defined validation rules. Okay, validation rules, right? User defined validations are the validations which we create. What are system validation? System validation is like if the person is entering system validation are the default validation rules. Like instead of phone number, if you try to add, enter text. So that's not a validation that we have created, but that's a system validation. Instead of a lookup, you are just trying to put some value, not fetching it from the lookup field. You just try to type in something. So these kind of things. Instead of number, you're putting a text, right? So that sort of system validations. An email ID without a @ symbol. So these are all system validations and the user defined validation. So before triggers are executed first, then the system validation and the user and validation. So firstly system validations and then the user defined validations. Then executes duplicate rules. Then any duplicate rules, like if you have made the field, some field unique, okay, so it will just go and check whether the values in the fields are unique or not. For the, let's say I've marked email field as a unique one, so it will go and check whether the email is unique or not. Got it? After doing these three things, before trigger, system validation, duplicate rules, it will save the record to the database, but doesn't commit yet. All right. So what happens here is the record is saved in the database, but it's kind of a temporary save. Got it? So you know how it works. So though it's saved in the database, the record is allowed to enter into the database, but that's just like a temporary save. It's not committed yet. Okay, doesn't commit. Means there's still a scope of rollback. Got it? So the record gets saved in the database but doesn't get committed. After this, all your after triggers will get executed. Once the record is saved, after triggers get executed. So some other record which needs to be updated through the after trigger, after insert, after update, those triggers get executed. Then all your assignment rules are executed. Okay, record assignment rule, which record needs to be assigned to whom, that sort of rule that gets executed. Okay, then your workflow rules are executed. Okay, so workflow rules are executed, but in this workflow rules, if there are workflow field updates, update the record again. Okay, so in case there are are any field updates in the workflow rule, the record gets updated again. Okay, so workflow rules get executed here. But in case there are any email alerts to be sent from the workflow rule, that email will not be sent here. Email will be sent only after the record gets committed. Field update kind of thing will happen here. Task assignment will happen here at this stage. But if there is an email which needs to be sent, and which makes a lot of sense, you would definitely not want to send an email to your customer till the time the record is finally not saved in the database, right? So that email wala thing will not happen here. Field update, task assignment, that sort of thing will happen. So if there the workflow rule has a field update, the record will again get updated. Okay. If the record was updated with a workflow field update, it fires before update trigger again and after update trigger one more time. So that's quite logical. So if the workflow rule initiates the field update, because of the field update the entire record is getting updated, and again the before update trigger and after update trigger will be fired once again. Okay, that's where we are. Then it executes any escalation rules if the record needs to be escalated, kind of a thing. If the record contains a roll-up summary field or is part of a cross-object workflow, performs calculations and updates the roll-up summary field in the parent record. Parent record goes through the same procedure. So if there is a roll-up summary field available in this object, as I'm talking about opportunity has a roll-up summary field for account, let's say. Now this, because the opportunity record got added, the account will get updated. So the parent record gets updated and the parent record goes through the same save procedure, whatever long procedure we are talking about. Though it looks a little lengthy, but all this happens in a fraction of second. So then the parent record will get updated. If the parent record is updated and the grandparent record contains a roll-up summary, so same procedure goes on for the grandparent record. Okay. So after all this is done, finally the record is committed to the database. Commits all DML operations to the database. Got it? Any problem within these, this save and the previous save, which was done a little early, any problem between this, the record will get rolled back. It will go back to 0. Got it? This is where finally the record is committed to the database. So commits all DML operations to the database. Now connect, you connect this to the transaction wala concept which we were talking a little while ago. So a transaction concept, what we were talking, if there are 3 DML operations, one account, one contact, one opportunity. Let me use the same example. So the account gets created and after that the contact gets created, right? So that creation happens till that stage where I say this account gets saved, it's not committed, then it does the same process for the contact, it gets saved, then it does the same process for the opportunity. Finally the data commitment to the database will happen for when it finds that no record has an error, then it commits all DML operations to the database, right? So in the meanwhile, if there is any problem in any of the records, it will get rolled back. Got it? So the save is happening once, temporary save where there is still a scope of rollback, and second is this permanent save. All right. So this is how it actually works. This is how the order of execution. See, because till the time it does not create an account, it cannot create a contact, because if it does not create an account, account ID will not be generated. If an account ID is not generated, how does it connect the contact to that account, right? So the record saving is important, but it's not committed to the database. Got it? Here it finally commits all DML operations to the database when everything is working fine. Okay. Then it, after the record is committed, then it executes the post commit logic. As I told you, sending an email. Okay. So anything which cannot be rolled back is post commit logic. Like, if you have sent an email to the customer, you cannot roll it back. Database changes in the database. If committed, that can be rolled back, right? So anything like sending email and all that stuff is committed only after this thing. Executes post commit logic such as sending emails. So that's the process. So if you think that that process is a little long for you to understand, let me try to put it in simple words. I mean, ideally, it's good that you understand this entire process, but it's as simple as that. Uh, Page layout specific rules. First thing, only if a request comes from UI, okay, the standard page layout user interface, right? Then your before triggers, system validations, custom validations. Custom validations means user defined validation rules. Data saved and not committed, okay. Then after trigger, after insert, after update trigger, OOTB functionalities. OOTB means out of the box. Um, which includes things like so you don't have to uh, in the slides we have talked about the exact order of execution, but if you just take this entire out of the box functionality as one unit, that's also fine, which includes things like assignment rule, all the declarative ways of defining your rules, or assignment rule, escalation rules, workflow rules, all these will come under this, right? So all this working fine. Then uh, parent record update, you just have to see that the parent does not have a problem with that. Again, parent record gets updated, then the grandparent gets updated if there is a requirement. So let's not get into that level of complexity, but okay, parent record gets updated, and finally data committed to database and post commit logic, like sending mails. Here it is. So simply step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Right? So this is where the data is saved, okay, and this is where the where finally the data is committed. Any problem in any of these, the data gets rolled back. Got it? So it's not finally committed. Alright, so if you are trying to insert the account got inserted, and then it's trying to insert the contact, and those are part of the same transaction, those two DML operations, so it will not let the account get committed till the time it's not sure that the contact can also be committed. Correct? So that's how it is. Clear? Okay. So that's about Apex order of execution. Now there is one more concept which we are going to talk. Any questions on the order of execution? Okay, we're good. All right. So there's one more thing that we are going to talk here, which is a DML versus Database.DML. Okay. DML statements, we understand DML statements, right? Insert, update, we are DML statements, right? So we use these DML statements. There is another thing which is called a database class. Okay, database class is a predefined class. We can use that class, and that class has certain methods. Okay, and that class has some DML methods as well. All right. So if you want to perform a DML operation, let's say if you want to insert records into the database, you can use the normal insert operation, or you can use database.insert operation. Okay, you have two options. When will we use the normal DML and when will we use the database.DML? That's what we're going to talk uh, in this section. All right. Why will we use that one? Okay. So let's see what is the problem with this DML statement and why this one is required. Okay. Apex offers two ways to perform DML operations using DML statements or database class methods. So the DML statement, is something which is very common. Okay, but there is some requirement for a database class method. What is that requirement? The point is that difference between the two options is that by using the database class method, you can specify whether or not to allow for partial record processing if errors are encountered. Okay, don't go ahead and do that now. A DML statement, okay, understand this way. A DML statement, when you use it, that DML statement either uh, completes for the entire set of records, or it completely gets rolled back. Now I'm not talking about a transaction. Transaction was a different concept where there were multiple DML statements. Think about one single DML statement. One single DML statement will either get completely executed or that will get rolled back, which means if I have a list of accounts, let's say list of accounts, okay, and let's say this is list of 100 accounts. Okay, now while you're trying to do an insert operation, you say insert. So this insert operation includes how many accounts? 100, right? If it inserts 50 accounts and it finds that the 51st record has an error, this entire DML statement will get rolled back, which means not even a single account will be inserted. Got it? So if it finds error, even in one of those 100 records, the entire DML statement will be rolled back. Clear? That's the challenge with the DML statement. Every time I might not have that sort of a requirement. Sometimes I might want to execute the ones which do not have error, right? But DML statement will not work that way. It will either insert all the 100 records without error, or if one of them has error, it will roll back the entire DML statement. So that entire operation will get rolled back. Got it? So that's the problem with the normal DML statement. Not problem, that's the way it works basically. Okay. So in case you want your DML statement to get executed partially also, even if some record has an error, it should just skip that record and do the operation for rest of the records. Then you need to use the database method. Got it? So normal DML operations are not able to do a partial DML statement operation. Okay, but our database class methods can do that partial DML operation also. So difference between the two options is that by using the database class method, you can specify whether or not to allow for partial record processing. So with the database class method, you can allow partial record processing as well. You don't have to do the full record processing. Partial record processing is also allowed if errors are encountered. So if there is an error which is encountered, still the partial processing can be done. Normal DML operation, no partial processing option, full or nothing. Okay. You can do so by passing an additional second Boolean parameter. You can do so by passing an additional second boolean parameter. Okay. So there's a boolean parameter there where you can actually say true or false, and you can allow partial or restrict partial. Okay, which means while you're using a database class method, at that time you have the choice of allowing partial record processing or not allowing that. That's your discretion, right? But for a normal DML operation like insert or update, there is no way you can actually do that thing, partial thing. It will either get completed or not, will be completely rolled back. If you specify false for this parameter, and if a record fails, the remainder of DML operation can still succeed. Got it? So there is a boolean parameter for this database class method where you can specify, as I told you, you can specify true or false. If you specify that as false, the remainder of the records can still be processed even if one or two records have errors. If you specify that as true, then it will act the same way as a normal DML statement. Okay. By default, this optional parameter is true, which means that if at least one S object can't be processed, all remaining S object won't, and an exception will be thrown. Correct? So by default, it's true, that parameter. So we define it like this. So one, I have this option, insert accounts. Second option I have is I can say database dot insert accounts false. Okay, so it will insert accounts, and this parameter is false, means it will allow partial processing. False means partial processing allowed. Okay, true means partial processing not allowed. Partial processing means even if some record has an error, it should go and process the other records. Partial processing not allowed will mean that there's no scope for it to do the partial update. It will just throw an error, throw an exception that okay fine, it could not be completed because one record had error. All right. So if you would have noticed, when you use data loader for doing any of those operations, the partial processing is allowed. Even if 5 records have error, other records get committed, right? All right. So this database class will do this. Okay. By default, the value is true. So if you don't specify anything, the default value is true. Got it? So this is how our DML versus database.dml work. Please tell me if you have any questions or queries here. And now this database class has a a lot of methods under it. Okay, so database class is a big class which has a lot of methods which can actually be used for performing database related operations. Fine. See, this is a complete detailed page with all the database class methods, but you don't need to be worried about all of them at this point of time. You can just look into the ones which are right. See, this is the database class method for insert. Insert, records to insert, as I said, accounts in the previous, all or none. Okay, all or none, if you make it true, this is after comma you just have to put it true or false, right? So if you say true, it will either allow all records or none of them. If you make it false, partial update or partial processing will also be allowed. Got it? So that's basically our DML statement. So the same way, the way I have insert, I have an update operation also here. The same concept. Modifies an existing subject record such as an individual account or contact in your organization's data. Okay, that's how. This one modifies one or more existing subject records such as individual account or contact, voice statement or invoice statement in your organization's data. Right? The same thing. So how do you call this method? It's again the way we did it. We called a method on the trigger class name dot method name. So that's how it is. Class name is database and method name is insert. So you can call it this way. Your records that you need to enter is accounts. That's their object. List of its object can be also defined, and you make it false. So in this, what will happen if there are some records which have error? Those records will be just, it will just skip those records, and the other remaining records will be executed. Clear? Please let me know if you have any questions or doubts here. We're all good.